It's Mortal Kombat 2 for the Sega Game Gear, the first Game Gear review on Classic Game Room. Let's turn this thing on. White screen, okay. How about reseating the card? There we go. There we go. Yeah, this thing was awesome in the mid-90s. They're a little hard to work with these days, especially with video. I wish that Sega had planned ahead with component video output and HDMI, but they didn't. So let's all transport ourselves back to 1994. Don your flannel shirt and prepare for the amazing Mortal Kombat 2 on the Game Gear in color. The Game Gear is actually harder to film than the Neo Geo Pocket Color. I didn't think it was possible, but it found a way. Probably because the Game Gear's screens have not aged well over the past millennia. And they're hard to film anyway, but you have to remember, or at least imagine a time, if you weren't there, when the majority of handheld video games were black and white and played on the Nintendo Game Boy. The full-color Sega Game Gear, which is basically Sega Master System quality in a handheld, was the Cadillac of handheld game consoles. This and the Atari Lynx, they were both really amazing at the time. While I'm not going to recommend that you buy this version of the game or buy a Sega Game Gear, because there's no reason to these days, this version of Mortal Kombat 2 is impressive for a 1994 handheld. It actually looks and plays like Mortal Kombat, for one thing, which on a little handheld from back in the day was probably quite a programming achievement. The music isn't that bad, but most importantly, the controls work really well. They play like Mortal Kombat, as well as that is. There's only 2 buttons on the Game Gear, so you have to get by with a 2-button configuration and a D-pad. And I found that this version of Mortal Kombat 2 to be easier and more forgiving than many of the other ones. That's about as good as the audio gets, but again, for a 1994 handheld game, it is an attempt to reproduce more than just beeps and bloops. So I'll keep this a short review because there's not much more to say. It's Mortal Kombat 2 condensed onto the Game Gear. An impressive job as far as I'm concerned, but don't run out and buy it. However, as you saw from the price tag at the beginning of the review, if you happen to buy a copy, you may not even notice the pile of change that you've just lost, because it won't be very large. There's 1,001 different better versions of Mortal Kombat out there, on just about every game, platform, and console ever made. So I would pass on this one unless you're a Game Gear fanatic and that is your only handheld game console. At which point I have to question your priorities because you'll be spending more on batteries than you will on games. Just suck it up and buy a Genesis and 32X, because the 32X version of this game is awesome.